My name is Aara, and I'm 24 years old. 24 years of surviving in a world that has no mercy for the weak, no compassion for the broken, no shelter for those of us who were born Omega and left to fend for ourselves. 24 years of being told that I am nothing. That I will always be nothing. That no man wants a weak Omega, and that weakness is all I will ever be. They said it so many times that I believed it. I believed every cruel word, every dismissive glance, every moment of rejection that carved itself into my soul like a blade slowly cutting through flesh. I believed that I was worthless. I believed that kindness was just another word for weakness, and that weakness would kill me. In this world, in our world of packs and hierarchies and brutal survival, kindness gets you killed. Softness gets you eaten alive. Compassion is a luxury that only the strong can afford, and I was never strong. But I was about to learn something that would shatter everything I thought I knew. I was about to learn that kindness, real kindness, the kind that comes from deep within your bones even when the world has given you every reason to be cruel, that kind of kindness could change everything. It could save lives. It could break down walls that seemed impenetrable. It could make even the coldest heart remember what it once was. Before I tell you what happened next, before I take you into the darkest and most transformative period of my life, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from, because I want to know that I'm not alone in this. I want to know that somewhere out there, someone understands what it means to feel invisible, unwanted, cast aside. Let's get started. The air was thick with the scent of pine and frost, a chill that cut through the bones and settled deep in your marrow, making every breath feel like you were swallowing shards of ice. The forest stretched endlessly before me, an ocean of trees that seemed to go on forever in every direction, each one identical to the last, each one a reminder of how lost I truly was. The cold, biting winds reminded me that winter was fast approaching, and with winter came death. For someone like me, winter was a death sentence written in the language of frost and starvation. I could feel it in the way the wind howled through the branches, stripping the last few leaves from the trees and scattering them like the broken dreams of everyone who had ever tried to survive out here alone. I could feel it in the way my breath came out in short, visible puffs that dissipated almost immediately, as if even the air was trying to erase my existence. I could feel it in my bones, in the trembling of my hands, in the weakness of my legs as I pushed forward through the undergrowth. Alone and packless, the upcoming months promised nothing but pain. For an Omega like me, being packless in winter meant certain death. It meant freezing to death in some forgotten corner of the forest, or starving because I wasn't strong enough to hunt, or being torn apart by rogues who would see me as easy prey. My trembling hands weren't just from the cold, though the cold was bad enough. They were the result of fear, pure and primal and all-consuming. Fear of what was coming. Fear of the choice I had just made. Fear that I had finally run out of options, and that this desperate gamble would be the last thing I ever did. My mother's last words echoed in my mind as I pressed forward, clutching the silver pendant she gave me so tightly that the edges cut into my palm. "Kindness is never weakness," she had said, her voice barely a whisper as the life drained out of her, as the sickness took her from me piece by piece. She had said it with such conviction, such absolute certainty, as if she knew something about the world that I didn't. As if she could see a truth that I was too broken to understand. But the world had taught me differently. The world had taught me that kindness got you killed. That compassion was a liability. That showing weakness meant inviting predators to tear you apart. I had no pack. I had no future. I was a stray Omega, the lowest of the low, unwanted and unprotected, worth less than nothing in the eyes of every wolf who crossed my path. After my mother died, I had tried. God, I had tried so hard. I had gone to pack after pack, begging for sanctuary, offering my services as a healer, as a cook, as anything they needed. I would have scrubbed floors. I would have cleaned out their stables. I would have done anything, endured anything, just to have a roof over my head and food in my belly. But every single pack turned me away. "We don't need weak Omegas," they said. "We can't afford dead weight. You'll just attract rogues. Find somewhere else. Somewhere else." As if there was anywhere else to go. As if the world was full of places that would welcome a lone omega with nothing to offer but desperation and a mother's dying words about kindness. With nowhere else to go, I reached the borders of the Northern Pack. The Northern Pack. Even the name sent shivers down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. This was the pack of Alpha King Ronin, the most feared alpha in all the territories. This was the pack that had fought in the Great War and lost their Luna. This was the pack that everyone spoke of in hushed whispers, warning their children to stay away, to never cross their borders, to never even think about approaching them. It was forbidden for lone omegas to enter. The Northern Pack had strict rules about rogues and strays, and I knew that crossing their border without permission could mean death. But I had no choice. The choice had been made for me by circumstances beyond my control, by a world that had rejected me at every turn, by the simple fact that if I didn't find shelter soon, I would die. Just for the winter. That's all I needed. Just somewhere to survive until spring, and then I would leave. I would disappear. I would never bother them again. Then, the howls began. The border patrol. The sound cut through the forest like knives, echoing off the trees and surrounding me from all directions. I froze, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Massive wolves emerged from the shadows, their forms weaving through the trees with predatory grace. They were huge, so much bigger than any wolves I had ever seen, their muscles rippling beneath their fur, their eyes glowing with an intelligence that was both beautiful and terrifying. And out of the darkness, a black wolf emerged. The Alpha King Ronin. I knew it was him before anyone said a word. I could feel it in the way the other wolves deferred to him, in the way the very air seemed to change when he appeared, in the raw power that radiated from him like heat from a fire. I had heard of him, of course. Everyone had heard of the Alpha King. The ruthless king who had lost his mate in the war and was rumored to have grown colder since her death. They said he had no mercy. They said he felt nothing. They said he would kill a rogue omega without a second thought. But when he shifted back into human form, I saw something different. Behind his intimidating presence, and he was intimidating, standing there with the moonlight casting shadows across his face, his silver eyes boring into me like he could see every secret I had ever kept behind all. Of that power and strength and terrifying authority, there was something more. Something broken. Something that mirrored the brokenness inside of me. And it made me wonder, was I just another tool to him? Another problem to be dealt with and discarded? Or could I help him too? Could my weakness somehow be strength in a way I had never imagined? Could the kindness my mother spoke of actually mean something here, in this place that seemed to have forgotten what kindness was? I lowered my gaze immediately, showing my submissiveness, every instinct screaming at me to make myself smaller, less threatening, less noticeable. The pack members circled me, their human forms now surrounding me in a ring of judgment. I could hear their whispers, their skepticism, their mockery. A stray omega. How pathetic. She's going to get herself killed. Why did she even come here? Weak. Always weak. That word followed me everywhere, branding me, defining me, reducing me to nothing more than a liability. But I had come this far. I had made my choice. And I wasn't going to let fear silence me now, not when survival hung in the balance. So I spoke, my voice trembling but determined. I'm here to ask for sanctuary. Just for the winter. I can work. I can help. I'm a healer, and I can cook, and I can clean, and I'll do whatever you need. I won't be a burden. I just need somewhere to survive until spring. The laughter that greeted my words was like acid on my skin. They thought I was ridiculous. They thought I was pathetic. And maybe I was. Maybe everything they thought about me was true. But then I remembered something I had heard, a piece of gossip that had filtered through the territories months ago. The Alpha King's son. His pup. The child who had been sick since his mother died, who was wasting away despite the pack's best healers, who was slowly fading like a candle in the wind. I mentioned him. I don't know what made me do it. Desperation, maybe. Or instinct. Or some last desperate gamble that I was willing to bet my life on. I heard about your son, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I heard he's been sick. I might be able to help. Everything changed. The mockery stopped. The laughter died. The circle around me seemed to tighten, and I felt the weight of every eye on me, but this time it was different. This time they weren't dismissing me. They were considering me. They were wondering if I could possibly be telling the truth. The Alpha King's silver eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my knees weak. What about my son? His voice was deep, filled with pain and power in equal measure. It was the voice of a man who had lost everything and was barely holding on, who would do anything to save what little he had left. What do you know about my son? I had no idea if I could help him. I had no guarantees. All I had were my mother's teachings, the herbs and remedies she had passed down to me, the knowledge she had insisted I learn even when I was too young to understand why. I don't know if I can help, I admitted, because I wasn't going to lie to him. I wasn't going to make promises I couldn't keep. But I would try. I have some knowledge of healing. My mother, she taught me. If you'll let me, I would try. I wasn't just a healer. I wasn't just a servant. I was desperate, and desperation makes you say things you might not otherwise say, makes you offer things you might not otherwise offer. I laid it all out there, everything I had, pathetic as it was. I can cook. I can clean. I can help with the sick and injured. I can make tinctures and poultices. I can gather herbs. I can do laundry. I can mend clothes. I can do anything you need, anything at all. Just please. Please let me stay. Just for the winter. The words felt pathetic even as they left my mouth. I sounded like I was begging because I was begging. I sounded weak because I was weak. The pack saw me as exactly what I was, a desperate Omega with nothing to offer but her desperation. But Ronan saw something else. Or at least, I hoped he did. When I said I could help his son, Ronan didn't immediately refuse. He didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss me. He just hesitated. It was a small thing, barely noticeable, just a moment where his expression shifted, where something flickered in his eyes that might have been hope or might have been desperation matching my own. And I knew that hesitation meant something had shifted. It meant I had a chance. It meant that maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't die in the cold after all. You will try, he said finally, and it wasn't a question. It was a command. You will try to help my son. If you succeed, you may stay for the winter. If you fail. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. We both knew what failure would mean. They took me to the pup, and my heart broke at the sight of him. He was so small, so fragile, lying in his bed with his skin too pale and his breathing too shallow. He looked like he was already halfway to the grave, like he had given up on living, like he was just waiting for death to finally claim him. The pack healers had tried everything, they told me. Every remedy they knew. Every treatment in their arsenal. Nothing had worked. The pup was fading and no one could stop it. But I saw something they hadn't seen. I saw the symptoms my mother had taught me to recognize. I saw the signs of a poison in his system, something that had been building up slowly over time, probably from contaminated water or spoiled food or something in his environment that no one had thought to check. It wasn't a disease. It wasn't a curse. It was something that could be treated if we acted fast enough. I worked day and night. I gathered the herbs I needed from the forest, ignoring the cold and the exhaustion and the pain in my hands from searching through frozen ground. I made tinctures and teas and poultices. I monitored every change in his condition, every fluctuation in his temperature, every variation in his breathing. I barely slept. I barely ate. Nothing mattered except saving this child, except proving that I wasn't useless, except showing that maybe my mother had been right and kindness wasn't weakness after all. As I cared for the pup, I saw the change in Ronan. He came to check on his son multiple times a day, and each time he saw the small improvements, the color returning to the pup's cheeks, the strength returning to his voice, the light returning to his eyes, something in him began to shift. The cold walls around him began to crumble, piece by piece, like ice melting under spring sun. He started to look at me differently. Not as a burden. Not as a weak Omega who had stumbled onto his territory. But as someone who mattered. As someone who had value. The walls between us were still there, though. They were massive and formidable, built from years of pain and loss and grief that had hardened into something impenetrable. But they were no longer as solid as before. Cracks were forming. Light was getting through. But not everyone in the pack was happy with my presence. They resented me. They feared my connection to Ronan. Some of them thought I was manipulating him, using his desperate love for his son to gain power and influence. Others thought I was a fraud, that the pup's recovery was just a coincidence, and I would be exposed as a charlatan any day now. Still others simply hated me for being a stray, for being weak, for being something that didn't belong in their strong, proud pack. I heard their whispers. I felt their hostile stares. I knew they were watching me, waiting for me to fail, hoping I would give them a reason to demand my expulsion. But I didn't care. I couldn't care. I wasn't going anywhere. Not until the pup was well. Not until I had fulfilled my promise to Ronan. Not until I had proven that I deserved to be here, that I had earned my place, that I was more than just the weak omega they all thought I was. And there was another reason I didn't want to leave, though I tried not to think about it too much. I was starting to care about this place. About these wolves who had grudgingly given me shelter. About the pup who smiled at me now when I brought him his medicine. About Ronan, who watched me with those silver eyes and made me feel things I had never expected to feel. As I spent more time with Ronan and the pup, I could feel the eyes of the pack on me constantly. Some were curious, wondering about this strange omega who had appeared out of nowhere and somehow won the Alpha King's favor. Some were hostile, seeing me as a threat to their established order, to their hierarchy, to everything they knew. My place in this pack was ambiguous. I wasn't quite a member, but I wasn't an outsider anymore either. I existed in some strange liminal space, neither fully accepted nor fully rejected, tolerated because of what I could do for the Alpha Son, but never truly welcomed. It was exhausting, living under that constant scrutiny. Every move I made was watched and judged. Every word I spoke was analyzed for hidden meanings. Every interaction with Ronan was dissected and discussed in whispered conversations I wasn't meant to hear but always did. The pressure of it wore on me, grinding me down little by little, making me question whether I had made the right choice in coming here. And then, as I looked at Ronan one day, really looked at him, seeing past the Alpha King to the man underneath, the father who loved his son desperately, the widower who was still grieving his lost mate, the leader who carried the weight of his entire pack on his shoulders, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just trying to help his son. I was starting to care for him. Starting to feel something for him. Something I didn't expect. Something I had no right to feel. I was falling for him, and it was the most frightening thing that had ever happened to me. Because I was still the weak omega. I was still the stray who had nothing to offer. I was still the outsider who didn't belong. And he was the Alpha King, powerful and untouchable, bound by duty and tradition and the expectations of his pack. There was no future where we could be together. No scenario where this ended well for me. I knew that. I understood that. But my heart didn't care about logic or reason or the impossible barriers between us. And then it happened. The moment that changed everything. The pup had recovered fully, running and playing and laughing like he had never been sick at all. The pack couldn't deny my success anymore. They couldn't pretend it was luck or coincidence or anything other than what it was. I had saved the Alpha King's son when no one else could. I had done what their best healers couldn't do. I had brought life back to a child who had been dying. Ronan called me to his study, and I went with my heart pounding, not knowing what to expect. Would he thank me and send me away now that my usefulness was done? Would he offer me a permanent place in the pack? Would he ask me to leave before I caused more disruption? What he did, I never could have predicted. As the pup grew stronger, Ronan's feelings had evolved too. He wasn't just grateful for what I did for his son. It was more than that. So much more than that. And when he kissed me, when he pulled me into his arms and pressed his lips to mine with a desperate hunger that spoke of months of denial and longing, I realized everything had changed. He wanted me, not as a healer, not as a servant, not as a temporary solution to his problems. He wanted me as his mate, as his equal, as someone worthy of standing beside him. The realization was overwhelming, flooding through me with an intensity that made my knees weak and my heart race. All my life, I had been told I was worthless. All my life, I had believed I was weak. All my life, I had accepted that no one would ever want me. But here was the Alpha King himself, the most powerful wolf in all the territories, telling me without words that I mattered, that I was valuable, that I was desired, that maybe, just maybe, my mother had been right all along and kindness wasn't weakness, but the greatest strength of all. But the peace was short-lived. Of course it was. Because in our world, peace never lasts. Happiness is always temporary. Joy is always shadowed by the threat of loss. The Eastern Pack sent an envoy with an offer, an alliance. A political marriage between Ronin and their alpha's daughter. A union that would bring peace between two powerful packs, that would end years of tension and potential conflict, that would benefit everyone involved. Everyone except me. Because accepting their offer meant rejecting me. It meant acknowledging that I was exactly what everyone had always said I was, a weak omega with nothing to offer, not worthy of being the Alpha King's mate, not suitable for the position of Luna, not strong enough to stand beside him and lead the pack. The tension in the air thickened until it was almost suffocating. I could see Ronin struggling with the decision, torn between his duty to his pack and his feelings for me. I could see the pack elders pressuring him, reminding him of his responsibilities, telling him that personal feelings couldn't be allowed to endanger the pack's future. I could see the Eastern Pack's envoy watching me with barely concealed contempt, as if I was an insect that needed to be crushed before I ruined everything. And I could feel my own heart breaking, shattering into pieces that I didn't know how to put back together. Because I understood. I understood that in this world, in our brutal hierarchy, duty trumps love. Strength trumps kindness. Political advantage trumps personal happiness. I was asking Ronin to risk everything for me, and what could I offer in return? What did I bring to the table that was worth the potential cost? In the end, I didn't just stay for the pup. I stayed because I had found something I hadn't thought I deserved: belonging. A place where kindness wasn't a weakness. A place where my gentle nature and healing skills weren't liabilities, but assets. A place where I could be valued for who I was, not judged for what I wasn't. And perhaps, just perhaps, I had found my place in Ronin's world. Not as a weak omega who had stumbled into his territory by accident, but as someone who belonged there, who had earned her place through dedication and compassion and the very kindness that everyone had told me would get me killed. Ronin rejected the Eastern Pack's offer. He stood before his pack and announced that he had chosen his mate, and that mate was me. The decision sent shockwaves through the pack, through the territories, through the entire political landscape of our world. There were those who supported him, who had seen what I had done for the pup and recognized my value. There were those who opposed him, who thought he was making a terrible mistake that would cost the pack dearly. There were those who remained neutral, waiting to see how it would all play out before committing to either side. But Ronin didn't waver. He faced down the opposition with the same strength and determination that had made him Alpha King in the first place. He defended me when others attacked me. He stood beside me when others tried to separate us. He showed the entire pack that I wasn't just a weak omega he was keeping around out of pity or gratitude. I was his chosen mate, and he would protect me with everything he had. And I finally understood what my mother had meant when she said kindness was never weakness. Because my kindness had saved a dying child. My compassion had broken through the walls around a grieving king's heart. My gentle nature had brought healing to a pack that had forgotten how to trust and how to love. I hadn't needed to be strong in the way they define strength. I hadn't needed to be aggressive or dominant or ruthless. I had just needed to be myself, and that had been enough. So I guess the rumors were true in a way. No one wanted a weak omega. But in the end, I wasn't weak. I never had been. I had just been measuring myself by the wrong standards, judging my worth by metrics that didn't apply to me, trying to be something I was never meant to be. And Ronin, the Alpha King, needed me more than he ever let on. He needed my gentleness to balance his strength. He needed my compassion to soften his hardness. He needed my kindness to remind him of what he was fighting for. The pain of those months alone in the forest, the fear of rejection, the anguish of believing I was worthless, all of that had led me here, to this moment, to this place where I finally belonged. The anger I had carried for so long, anger at a world that had rejected me, anger at packs that had turned me away, anger at a system that valued strength above all else and left people like me to die. That anger was still there, burning in my chest like a fire that would never fully go out. But alongside it now was something else. Something stronger. Something more powerful than anger or pain or fear. It was hope. It was love. It was the knowledge that I had found my home, and that home had found me, and that maybe the world wasn't quite as cruel as I had thought. Maybe there were places where weakness was actually strength. Maybe there were people who would value you for your kindness rather than punish you for it. Maybe there were second chances waiting for those brave enough to take them. I became Luna of the Northern Pack, and I poured everything I had into that role. I used my healing skills to help pack members who had been suffering in silence. I used my gentle approach to resolve conflicts that had been festering for years. I used my kindness to build bridges between wolves who had forgotten how to trust each other. And slowly, gradually, the pack that had resented me began to accept me. They saw that I wasn't trying to replace their lost Luna or diminish her memory. I was just trying to serve them in my own way, using the gifts I had been given. There were still those who doubted me. There were still moments when I questioned myself, when the old fears came rushing back and I wondered if I was really strong enough for this role. There were still nights when I woke up in a cold sweat, remembering the forest and the cold and the certainty that I was going to die alone and forgotten. But then Ronan would hold me, and the pup would laugh, and the pack would come to me with their problems and trust me to help solve them, and I would remember. I would remember that I had survived, that I had persevered, that I had taken my weakness and transformed it into strength, that I had proven everyone wrong who had ever told me I was worthless. My mother's pendant still hangs around my neck, and sometimes I touch it and think about her words. Kindness is never weakness. She was right. She was always right. I just had to nearly die to understand what she meant. I had to be rejected by every pack, abandoned by the world, pushed to the absolute edge of survival before I could see the truth she was trying to teach me. Kindness is the greatest strength there is. Because it takes real courage to be gentle in a brutal world. It takes real power to choose compassion when cruelty would be easier. It takes real determination to maintain your humanity when everything around you is trying to strip it away. I am Aara, and I am 24 years old. I am a lone omega who found her pack. I am a weak wolf who discovered her strength. I am living proof that the world's definitions don't have to define you, that labels don't have to limit you, that the things that make you different might actually be the things that make you valuable. And if there's anyone out there listening to this, anyone who has ever felt weak or worthless or unwanted, I want you to know something. I want you to know that you matter. That your gentleness is not a flaw. That your compassion is not a liability. That the world might try to tell you that you need to be harder, stronger, more aggressive, more dominant, but the world is wrong. Be kind. Be gentle. Be compassionate. Be yourself. And trust that somewhere out there is a place where those qualities will be valued, where you will be welcomed, where you will find the belonging you've been searching for. It might take time. It might take pain. It might require you to walk through the darkest forest of your life, cold and alone and terrified. But on the other side of that forest, there is light. There is warmth. There is home. And there are people who will love you not despite your gentleness, but because of it. That's my story. That's how a weak omega became a Luna. That's how kindness conquered strength. That's how I learned that my mother's dying words held more truth than all the cruel lessons the world had tried to teach me. And I would do it all again. Every painful step. Every moment of fear. Every instance of rejection. Because it brought me here, to this life, to this love, to this understanding of who I am and what I'm worth. So no, they were wrong. Everyone who said no man wants a weak omega was wrong. Because Ronan wanted me. The Alpha King himself chose me. And together, we're building something that proves kindness isn't weakness. It's the foundation of real, lasting strength. If you believe that kindness is a strength, make sure you like this video. And if you believe that kindness is a strength, subscribe to see more incredible stories. Comment below where you're watching from, and don't forget to share this with a friend who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to see more incredible stories.